Welcome to Genuine Life Recovery. We're here to help you and your loved ones overcome addictions and other addiction related mental health challenges. In this show, we dive into the physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual aspects of addiction, mental health, recovery, family dynamics, codependency, and more. You can listen on your favorite app or at jodystevens.org. Hey friends, welcome back to our Serenity series. This is part 4. And in this episode, we're talking about applying the Serenity Prayer, the concepts in it to real life, and embracing the power of God and Christ that is released within that prayer, and applying it to extreme childhood trauma. And I'm joined by author and coach and speaker and overcomer, Chad Gaines. And you can find him at gaineschad.com. And he's written a few books, including one so I'm halfway through your book, Chad, which is crazy, sad, beyond that, inspirational though, but all those things at the same time. So welcome, Chad. Let me know if I missed anything. And I also understand that a movie is in the works for your story.
Yes, that is true. Thank you, Jody, for having me today. Yeah, they are turning my book into a major motion picture. We're currently in pre-production right now with that through Angel Studios, which is a great platform, as well as Amazon Prime, Peacock, and Netflix.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're going to be famous. So I can say, I knew you when. Or maybe you're already famous. I don't know.
I don't even know what that means anymore.
I found you on Facebook and I was like, sounds like you have a story. You need to come on the show. So this is awesome. Before we get into it, when does the movie come out, and do you know what's it called?
The movie is called Pocket of Hope, the Chad Gaines story.
Wow. Okay.
It should be out about next year, about this time in theaters. Okay. It's going to be in 2,000 different theaters, as well in those platforms that I just spoke about.
Wow. Okay. So before we dive into your story, I'd like for you to share sort of, what like they say in recovery, what happened, where were you? What did God do? And where are you now? So before that, and then what we're going to do, friends, is kind of take some of his story and have you sort of apply it to the Serenity Prayer and some of the concepts in it. So I'd like to read that prayer, and then we'll dive into it. So, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. That was the hardest part for me. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you in the next, forever. Amen.
Amen.
What a beautiful prayer. And most people don't get past the very short part of the prayer. So
that's true.
yeah. So it's a beautiful prayer, and it's not just for people struggling with addiction. The prayer is all about surrendering to God's will regardless of circumstances. So you had to do that in a big way, Chad. So take us back to your childhood, how you were raised, the things that happened. Give us kind of the skinny version, if you would.
Well, Jody, I was born in the 1970s in the Midwest, and that's really where my story takes place. Mm-hmm. And it was just set in a Midwestern town right outside Chicago, Illinois, in the Indiana area, not too far away from where Michael Jackson grew up, in Gary, Indiana. And my dad left when I was 5 years old, and that's when the abuse started happening from my mother, physically, mentally, emotionally, just every type of abuse you can imagine, other than sexually. But that's where it really took place and really started out, when after my dad left in 1978.
Wow.
And my mother, in the beginning, my mother would just started out with backhands, yelling and screaming, cussing, and then it turned to this vicious, I'm going to kill you every single day. Every single day I heard that at least 5, 6, 7 times a day as a young boy, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old.
Gosh.
And after my dad left and all that changed and all the violence came out, and then it became slapping and spitting on me, humiliating me in public in front of other people. And back then, nobody would ever say a word because it was
Yeah.
more of whatever happens in their house is their business. And, we don't say a word about it. But it was
Right.
happening in public for many, many years.
Wow. What you describe in your book is beyond the pale of, there's child abuse, but for you it was like abuse, it was torture, it was the most extreme, the most extreme that I've ever read, and I've read a lot of things, stories and things like that. And you it sounds like, I mean, you're a little kid, right? Your brain is forming, developing through this, and you kind of think, right, this is normal. Like all kids grow up like this, right?
I did. I did. I had really one good friend that lived about 5 houses down from me, Mark. And that's when I knew that my house was much different than his. Because for one, he had a mom and dad, he had twin brothers, and just had a loving, nurturing family that I never knew that existed. I missed so many days at school. By the time I got to the 5th grade, I had failed 4 times. So I was way older than the average student, way older than my friend Mark. Watched him go on to middle school while I'm still in elementary school because I've missed so many days of school to child abuse. The first year of 1st grade, I think it was, I missed 43 days of school due to child abuse. And now I think if a parent had a child that missed 43 days of school, they'd probably bury him under the jail because
Yeah.
they'd be in so much trouble. But then it wasn't an issue. You just had to take a written note to school, and that's what it was. My mom had a 6th grade education, and so she would just write a little note and put them on the TV. And when I was able to go back to school, I just took one of those notes off the TV, handed it to my teacher, and that was it. Nothing was ever said, nothing was ever done. And then there was a turning point in my life when I got to about 4th grade, where they would see me coming to school in the same clothes for a week at a time. The same clothes, same shirt, same jeans or corduroy pants is what I used to wear a lot. And so they had a little talk with me in the office, the principal. And I remember them calling the state police. And I remember sitting in this office, and this big, tall gentleman walks in with this big hat, state police officer,
A
and
long, tall Texan.
yeah, wanted to talk to me. So we went in the principal's office and had a talk, and he asked me if I had any memory of my mother hitting me or slapping me, and of course I denied it because that's the last thing you want to do is tell what was going on in your home because
Yeah.
with the threats that I got and my mother telling me every day she's going to kill me, it was just a matter of time because I just knew that was around the corner. And I remember in that 4th grade is what triggered all this, is where we had a kind of like a story that we had to write. We could write it on anything we want. And I was going to write mine based on baseball. And then at the last minute, the teacher changed it and said, I want everybody in my classroom, to write a story about what you want to be when you grow up. And I thought, wow, this is exciting. I'm still going to go with the baseball. And then I remember my story because I got home and there was a lot of trouble going on at home and a lot of trouble going on in my family because I was the only child. But my whole mother's side of my family was very violent and very vicious, acting people. And I remember writing my story and it says, I just want to grow up. That was
Yeah.
my whole story. So they knew that there was a problem there because, like, what child says, I just want to grow up
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
ask them, what do they want to be when they grow up? I mean, I ask my 9-year-old daughter now what she wants to be when she grows up, and it's usually a vet or, something else. She has something in mind that she prefers and likes to do. And I had
Yeah.
none of that because I was just numb clear across the board when it came to asking me, hey, kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I just want to grow up because my mom tells me every day that she's going to kill me. So I just want to grow up. And when I wrote that on the paper, that's when they called the state police and did an investigation and found a lot of bruises and a lot of cuts and a stab wound in my arm.
You must
And
have
they
had a
could,
lot of broken, but like bones that had re-healed and stuff, things like that. I
I,
mean,
I had a lot of
ugh.
scars. I had a broken nose from my
Okay.
mother
Yeah.
being kicked down the stairs, down the basement.
And in that story, because I got to about that point, and then when you got into gangs and stuff, which completely makes sense. By the way, I mean, everything you did was a normal reaction to that kind of a trauma. But it sounded like she almost did kill you a couple times. So this it wasn't just like smacking you. This was like you were almost dead and you're like 8 at the bottom of the stairs. Like what goes through the mind of an 8 or 10 or 11-year-old I mean, because you don't even have the words to make sense of that craziness, you know?
I think it's the human will to live. I think that has a lot to do with the prayer also.
Yeah.
And when it comes to an age, there's no age that discriminates on how much a human spirit wants to live.
Yeah.
And that was for me. It didn't matter if I was 7 or 17 or 27 or, 57. It didn't matter. I just knew one thing and I just wanted to live. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just wanted to live. And that became my whole surrounding life. When I was at school, I was a horrible student because I wasn't there enough to learn anything.
How could you be? Yeah. I mean,
Later
wow.
on in life, when I was 15 years old and we escaped the investigation of child abuse, my mother was being investigated for one of the most horrific child abuse cases in the state of Indiana at the time, and was tipped off by some of the police force that she went to school with. So we're all living in a small town, and everybody knew everybody, as some might know. That's how it works. Small town
Yeah.
politics is what they say a lot. But
And everybody knew what was going on.
everybody
That's
knew what
what's
was going
frustrating
on.
to me. It's like nah. But I
Yeah,
get it. The '70s. I grew up in the '70s in Alaska. I mean, everybody was drunk. But I
yeah, exactly,
digress. But
exactly.
yeah, I
So,
just
so there was no God in my life or anything like that whatsoever. Never went to church. Never learned about the gospel or anything what God was. Jesus in my home was a cuss word. Simple as that.
yeah.
Taken in vain and a cuss word. That's all I knew. I didn't even know there was a real Jesus. Like I just thought that was a made up cuss word
Yeah.
that my family was until I got involved with the gangs and drugs. We fled the investigation, moved to Florida,
Oh,
and
great. Yeah.
yeah,
You ever watch
that's
the
where
true crime shows? Miami, South Beach, Florida. It seems like everything
exactly,
happens in
exactly.
Florida. So
That
you
was
were
kind
right
of
there.
like us leaving this very small town of 512 people, moving to this huge city with 100,000 people in Lakeland, Florida, nearly overnight. And I mean, not exaggerating, overnight.
Right. Yeah.
There was a Ryder truck pulled up to our house, and my mother instructed me, take whatever you can. We're moving right now. And of course, at 8, 9 years old, I had no clue what was really going on. I had to leave my friend. I had to leave what few people that I knew at school that even associated with me in elementary school, because there wasn't too many. Because I was never there for one, and two, I had the nickname Dirty Boy because I was always wearing dirty clothes. So I was bullied a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I went to middle school in Lakeland, Florida, and then I had this huge growth spurt. And then I went from the dirty slow boy, is what they called me, to this great basketball player because now I'm much taller than everybody else. I'm much
Yeah. Yeah.
older than everybody else. So now I took on a whole new demeanor of this somewhat middle school hero. But one time I came home from school and my mother had all my belongings, well, some of my belongings on the driveway and said, "You're big enough now to take care of yourself. Get out my house. You're not welcome here anymore."
In other words, you're
So,
big enough to hit back, so leave.
right, right. I can't beat on you any longer. So you have to move on. You have to figure this out at 15 years old. Because obviously, you're not going to be able to work. So you're going to be begging to come home. And that wasn't the case. Fortunately for me, I was able to get a job at a grocery store bagging groceries at 15 years old, and
Well, you were
did
an
sleep.
adult when you were like 6, so by that time you knew how to
That's true.
survive. I
That
mean,
that's true.
you had to.
That's how I've always felt. I've
Oh
always
my
felt
gosh.
like
Yeah.
I was the protector and the warrior of my family. And then later on down the road, when I began to share my story in 2000, which is now almost 25 years ago, sharing my story, I was messing around on Google one night and I said, I wonder what my name means. So I Googled the meaning of Chad and it came up warrior and protector. I was just in
Wow. Is that
shock and
like
I said,
the
that don't surprise
Hebrew?
me.
Is that a Hebrew?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. I'm praised
So
Jewess, whatever that means, but I love Israel, so there you go. Wow. Okay, so you get out because your mom kicks you out, and then you get into gangs and drugs, of course, which makes perfect sense. And you it said
drinking
in your
heavily.
book, yeah, that cocaine was your choice, and that probably made you feel invincible, more powerful, I would think, because of how. See, for me, I had this anxiety thing, so it was alcohol, but for you, I could see where. You do a couple lines and it's like nobody can mess with me now, kind of a thing. Was that the draw for you, or
It,
you
it
know?
definitely was.
And of
It
course,
definitely
by
was.
this time, just for those listening, you've already got all kinds of chemical imbalances. People need to understand when you're raised with trauma, this is where mental health disorders come from. So here you're
Absolutely.
sitting here in front of me, and by all rights, you should be like Ted Bundy or something, with the mom thing. I mean, I hate to say that, but there's
No,
all
it's true.
these violence. I can't even imagine, we hear about father abuse, but having a mother do this to you is so, it's a little bit different. And I had so many questions like how, and we can get to that at another time, but like what that was like and how it impacted your relationship with women. Were you frightened of them a lot? I mean, you would think that you would be very frightened of women.
I wasn't frightened of women because I never had that, how should I say it, like this ability to have those feelings because
Mm-hmm.
I was beaten so bad that it just become numb. So I didn't
Yeah.
really have feelings. I didn't have this up and down slope that most people do when they can feel things. I just had this numbness.
Wow.
So when I first started dating, this is where I ran into trouble because I would find people just like my mother. If you weren't
Yeah.
yelling and screaming at me, I wasn't going to date you because I didn't
Oh
know
my
anything
gosh.
else,
Yeah. 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 That
you
makes
know?
sense. That makes sense.
I
Wow.
was 48 years old before I found my first healthy relationship.
Yeah.
48 years old, you know? So,
Wow.
yeah, it affected my whole life, not just my dating, but it affected my money management skills. It affected the way I look at myself in the mirror. For a year, I
Oh,
brushed my teeth and shaved in the mirror or in the shower because I didn't even want to look in the mirror. I took the mirror off the wall in the bathroom for about a year,
oh,
and you know, brushed my hair without a mirror, shaved without a mirror, brushed my teeth in the shower. Just so
jeez.
self-conscious of myself and the way I looked because when my mom initially broke my nose, she told me, "I'm doing this for your own good because I don't want no one to love you."
Oh, God.
So that's when she kicked me down the steps in the basement, the part of the book you read. And I'm laying there, and the blood is coming out, but I don't realize it's not coming out from my nose area. It's coming out from the top where she split it open because she kicked me with her shoes on, and I rolled all the way down the stairs to the bottom. And I just laid there, not knowing, like, okay, she's just going to leave me here to die? Am I going to starve to death down here? Am I going to, bleed to death? Because I was bleeding very, very badly. Never taken to the hospital. That's why my nose healed the way it did.
Yeah.
And she just always told me it was for my best, it was for my own good. But this is where the mental abuse came in, where she would say something like this, and then she would lean into me and says, "Well, you know your mother loves you, right?"
Ugh.
That was always her thing. After she would get done yelling or even spitting in my face or telling me she's going to kill me, she would lean in and always tell me, "Well, you know your mother loves you, right?" Always questioning me because she knew my answer was going to be yes. I mean, obviously, if I said no, it would be a vicious attack again.
Right. Yes, the sky is purple. I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah.
Right? Yeah, sure, mom. It's purple.
Oh,
you know.
I am so sorry that this happened to you. I'm so sorry. But ugh, oh my gosh. But I want to, so, so you finally get out of this. Obviously, you turn to drugs and crazy stuff. Then at one point, this part, your mother actually kills your father. Is
My
that,
mother killed my stepfather.
oh
Yes.
gosh.
My mother remarried after
Okay.
my dad left. He never came back. My dad never came back. I was 28 years old when my mother killed my stepfather. And that was the first time she would kill. Wasn't the last. It was only the
Wow.
first.
So is she in prison now? Is she deceased?
She's deceased. She died in 2017. I only know that because I got a call from my cousin, and he says, "Your mother's in hospice. She's only got about 24 hours to live." And I just wanted to let you know. I tried to make things right toward the
Yeah.
end of her life by calling my grandmother, talking to my grandmother, and just simply saying, "I forgive you." I didn't go into any details. I didn't go into any circumstances or incidents that happened. I just said, "I forgive you." And that's the first time in my whole life I ever heard my grandmother cry. Ever.
Yeah.
My whole life. So my grandmother, she was very vicious as well, and that's probably where the abuse and trauma originally came from, and carried on to my mother, and then my mother carried it on to me. And getting back to your statement about what I should probably be because of all the trauma, that is very true. 43% of people with childhood trauma become serial killers. Isn't that crazy? 43%.
Really? And yet there's so few of them. Well, that we know of.
Well, yeah, that's
Wow.
the ones that have been caught.
Because like
We don't
Kemper
we
is a
don't
good
know the ones
example.
that.
Yeah.
What is it like? One of every 18 people that we pass on the street are serial killers, and we don't even know.
Oh, wow. I did. Well, I knew because I'm a
So,
true.
like, if you're in a big city like I am here in San Francisco, and I walk downtown Union Square and I pass 18 people, one of them out of the 18 people are serial killers. That's crazy to even think
Is
of
that like a
because of childhood trauma.
is that a law
That's how
enforcement?
much it affects us.
Is
I'm
that a
sorry.
oh, is that a law enforcement statistic? Or I'm one of these true crime nuts. I've read about all this, so I didn't know that. But
It's a PTSD trauma statistic, yes.
oh no, I knew the trauma, but like that there's that many serial killers. That's the one I
Yes.
didn't know. But yeah, I mean, you read like people like Kemper and stuff like that. And in the end, he finally killed his mother and other things, and then he was like, okay, now I'm done. And he went to
Well,
prison because she was gone. And so, anyway, I mean, I guess the point is just here you are. I mean, look at you now. I mean, this is only God can do this, you know?
absolutely, absolutely. And I've heard, hundreds and hundreds of stories of men and women killing their parents or a parent because of child abuse,
Yeah.
and that was never a thought or anything when I was being abused or being tortured, is what I call it in the book, because that's exactly what it
Yeah.
was.
You basically
Excuse
were
me.
raised in a concentration camp.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
a really
it's a
good way
really good
to describe
equivalent.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it sounds like the numbness saved you because they call that disassociative disorder, but did you have anything, obviously the PTSD, but did you have any other mental health disorder that came out of this, like a dissociative disorder or things like that, schizophrenia?
Yeah, that was a part of my PTSD, just dissociating with
Yeah.
everybody and everything. And it's
Mhm.
it's crazy to think that I can go on stage in front of 4,000 people, but if my wife and I have a get together at our house here and 15 or 20 people come over, I
Yeah.
want to stay in the bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just it's just really bizarre how that works and how the long-term effects of trauma affects a person. It never goes away. I mean,
No.
I can have all the treatment in the world, and I do. I go through therapy every week for the rest of my life. I will take medication for the rest of my life
Yeah.
to sleep because I have
Oh, yeah.
horrific nightmares. During the day, I have flashbacks of things from 1980, and sometimes I'm stuck in 1983 the whole day,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
to the point where I will sit here at my desk and have this blank stare out the window, and I'm listening to 1983 music because I'm there,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because it takes me back. So I have to perform things for myself to snap out of that, as it's very, very crucial to have a great support system like I do within my wife. And she knows, like, oh, okay, he's staring out that window again. I need to snap him out of this. I
Yeah.
need to go nudge him or say, hey, you want to go for a ride or something? So we have to get out of the house,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
and it's so understandable with the trauma, but also, you had to learn to perform. So,
I did.
being real is much harder than because intimacy there was nothing like that. You didn't learn any coping skills, right? So you're in
None.
performance mode, and I get that to some degree. Like I can, I'm like dyslexic and have all these other things, and so I can be all, performance mode, but then like the sort of the more intimate stuff can be harder because it's like, oh, I don't want anybody to see the real me. All right. So, and Robin Williams was like that, he's like, he could do all that, but one on one, he couldn't do it, and so
Exactly.
it's a whole, so it does make sense. Wow. Okay. So how did you, so you're on the streets, you're ganging and doing drugs and things like that. And then how did you come to know the Lord, to quit drugs, all that stuff? Like what happened?
It was many years later, actually. I got shot in the face over a bad drug deal
Oh my
from a
gosh.
rival gang. So my uncle come and picked me up and from Florida, and we went back to Indiana. So I moved back to the small town thinking, well, there's nothing there. There's no really drugs because it's a small town. Nothing will happen, and maybe I can clean up my life and get it together, is what they used to tell me.
Yeah.
So I did. So I went back there with him and cleaned up my life for a long, long time, probably 10 years. I just instantly stopped everything, got away from all the drugs and gangs because there was nothing like that there in the farm town.
Yeah.
And I started working, got a really decent job. And then I went through a breakup in a relationship. And the breakup in the relationship triggered something inside of me to go find drugs again. No matter who I had to ask or who I had to hang out with, I needed to go back to that to cover up the pain that I was feeling.
Yeah.
Unknowing to me that that's the reason why I was doing it at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I began to do drugs again. And it just spiraled out of control with the heavy drinking.
Yeah.
The cocaine led me to cocaine and heroin at the time. And I knew something was going to have to stop this, or whether it be death or end up in prison. And fortunately for me, I ended up in prison. Not because of the drugs, but because of criminal gang activity and organized crime that I was involved with at the time in Indiana. And went to prison, maximum security for 1 year, luckily.
You were actually like robbing drug dealers. It's interesting that the guy that led me to the Lord, ex-heroin addict, right? 8th grade education. He looked like Jim Caviezel in The Passion of the Christ. Amen.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, he's like, so he went from they would rob the drug dealers. I'm like. So he went from robbing drug dealers to finding the Lord. Now I don't see him anymore, but when we were dating, he'd be like, going buying groceries for little old ladies, and he said, oh yeah, I used to steal their purses, and I mean the transformation is amazing. I mean only God can do that,
And that's what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me when I got out of prison. There was a pastor that was coming to see me in prison because he seen something inside of me that I didn't see or other people didn't see. And he just knew, like, hey, if you're really serious about sharing your story like you say,
Yeah.
I'll invite you to speak at my church. Ooh. Well, my church in the small farm town was full of people that I had
yes.
either did bad things to, said bad things about. I had ripped them off in some way. I had stolen their car stereos or whatever the case may be. But it was 247 people, and it was like looking at your enemies, of the people that you hurt, face to face on stage. It was like, now you're in the spotlight. How are you going to convince us you've changed?
Did you tell them what happened? Did you say, look, this is what happened to me? Or were you not comfortable with that?
That's when I was just starting out. Yes, I did. And I think the reason why I did that, because I was trying to make excuses. I was trying to make excuses to say, well, this happened to me. This is why I did this to you and your family.
But it is
and of course
true. I mean, you're
it is true.
Complete victim. But I understand what you're saying. You're
but
in
they
that
didn't want to
recovery
hear that.
where it's like, you have to. We're accountable regardless of what happened. Once we're adults, right? We are accountable for how we react to the trauma, but I know what it is. There's a reason. It's not an excuse, but there's a reason, right? So
right.
Yeah. So
right. So I did describe that reason of what I had been through and how I just got out of prison 2 weeks ago, and now I want to share my story. And they were very accepting of that because they had really good hearts, but they were very hurt of the things that I did, rightfully so. And I remember walking off stage. That's the first time I've ever talked in front of anybody, and it was 247 people. And an elderly gentleman walked up to me, and I'm waiting for this guy to just let me have it because I probably ripped off his grandchildren or something. You know, I'm just, I'm
Fist
just
fight
at the
outside the
end of,
church. Let's get on.
I mean, I just got down to the third step, and I see this guy coming at me, and I'm like, okay, well, you know, I said in prison, God, if you give me one more chance, I'll go wherever you want me to
Have
go.
you ever seen The Apostle with Robert Duvall?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, you got to watch it. But yeah, there's like a brawl outside the. It is the best. You have to watch it. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was waiting for. And this elderly gentleman come up to me and he says, "Chad, I'm a professor at a university. How would you like to share your story at our university?" I didn't know nothing about universities, didn't have a college degree then, got my GED in prison
Wow.
just to finish high school, and
Yeah.
now this guy is wanting me to speak at a university. Okay, sure, I'll speak at your university because I made a deal with God and I said, wherever you want me to go, I'll go. So if you want me to share my story, yeah, sure. So he goes, okay, well, I'll be in touch. Called me a few days later. And by then I was getting really nervous because he actually called.
Oh no, it's real.
Yeah, it's real. And then I said, his name was John. And I said, John, I'm really nervous right now. I forgot to ask you, where's this university at and how many students are going to be there, because I've never done this before. And he said, Chad, there's going to be 4,000 students there, and it's going to be at the University of Notre Dame.
Oh gosh.
And it changed my life. Wow. Changed my whole life. After I went to speak at Notre Dame, I came home 2 weeks later. I had 500 emails from people all over the country wanting me to speak at their
Wow.
middle schools, high schools, colleges. I was just in disbelief. I was like, I don't know anybody in Chandler, Arizona. How does this work? Well, at the time, it was right before spring break. So I spoke at the Joy ACC where they play basketball, where Notre Dame plays basketball. And they put on the college scoreboard my email address. Said, if you would like to have Chad speak at your functions or your brothers and sisters' middle schools or high schools, please send him an email.
Wow.
Well, me not knowing how universities worked, I thought everybody that goes to Notre Dame lived in South Bend, Indiana. I didn't know.
Right. Right.
But what was really happening is everybody went home all over the country, took my email and said, you know, we want to have Chad speak at our middle school. We want to have Chad speak at our high school. So for the next year, I was on the road 250 days.
Wow. Well, and that's beautiful because you're serving as because all this abuse, not like your extreme, but probably 1 in 3 kids or something crazy is being abused. Girls are sexually abused, boys too. And if you're someone who works in the school district, you can't possibly deal with all of that. So for someone like you to come in and share, and then I'm sure encouraging them to talk, to get help, to, that it doesn't have to be this way type of a thing, is going to be very impactful and very needed. So that's awesome. So, wow. We could talk for like another 2 hours on your story, but I want to get in a little
Easily.
bit just to kind of tying this into the serenity prayer and just the concept of surrendering to God. So, okay, so you're out of prison, you're speaking, all of a sudden you go from this to this big career, right? And you still have all this trauma and stuff. So looking at it through the lens of a biblical lens and the concept of this serenity prayer, when you reflected on the childhood, what were like the hardest things for you to accept? And how did you come to terms with it? Because so much of a lot of times acceptance is not wallowing in it, not spinning, not people think that acceptance means sort of a different thing. In other words, I can be outwardly not doing anything, but inwardly obsessing, and I'm still trying to control something. I'm still not accepting it. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
based on all that, what was the hardest thing for you to just say, I can't change this. I have to accept this.
I think the hardest thing to accept for me was not getting birthday cards and hugs like every other children or
Yeah.
child that I was around from their parent. That was never a thing. I can remember my mom hugging me maybe 4 times in my whole life. That's all I remember, because it was just so much hate and so much regret of having me and then having a hysterectomy so she can have any more children. And then my father left on top of that. Not that those are excuses, but those are the reasons. So I think that was very difficult for me to accept. Inward, I was crying to accept that. And then I got into this period with my dating where I went through relationship after relationship after relationship,
Yeah.
because I didn't know anything else than a woman yelling and screaming at me or cussing at me or throwing things at me. And if I wasn't in a relationship with a person like that, I would break up. I would self-sabotage
Yeah.
and break up. So, because I wasn't used to the hugs and the kisses and those things, it was very difficult for me to have physical touch. So that was very difficult for me to accept,
Well,
knowing that
yeah.
other children that I was in contact with were getting this, you
Yeah.
know,
Well,
and
and
I
part of the,
wasn't.
yeah, part of the reason that we do that is it's a normal thing to recreate what happened. So it's an unconscious thing where I'm going to recreate the situation of my childhood and somehow I'm going to fix it. So we keep getting drawn to the same thing. And once you understand there's no fixing, then we can let
Right.
go of, you know what I mean? So it's looking at everyone and saying, they're not my mom, they're not my dad, even though we're triggered. So you were kind of doing, psychologically what was pretty normal until you accepted I couldn't change this person. And then now it's like healthy relationships. But how did faith help you through that, and how were you able to find some peace in that process of coming to terms with that? Like we look at, my husband and I a lot of times will say, if it weren't for God, we wouldn't have a chance. Or there's the frustration of being a late bloomer and the wasted time, and just saying, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. But it's hard.
I think for me, it was the moment that I had my car wreck. And I don't know if you have read that part. I don't think you have
No, I
yet.
haven't
I don't
gotten
want to
that
give
far.
too much away of the book.
I got to like
But
48% last night.
yeah,
I like to leave
but
some things like I don't want to read it all. Sometimes I like to just know a little and then we talk. So
yeah. And for a lot of people, it's a hard read. So people can only read 2 pages a day because it's so difficult for
yeah,
them.
yeah.
And I get that, looking back and looking at the book itself.
Who am I?
It
Yeah,
is. And knowing that I'm working on the second book right now, it's challenging.
yeah,
But I know 100% without my faith in God, I wouldn't be here today. There's no chance, because the car wreck, getting to that, is really the first time I've ever cried out to God. I have talked to God a lot in the past, even in jail and prison, but I've never had that moment where it's life or death and you need to, this is your fork in the road, so to speak.
yeah,
What are you going to do?
yeah.
What comes out when you're getting ready to die? What words come out? Most people won't know that until they get ready to die.
Right.
Well, I was in that case where the car was rolling over and over and over, and I was still conscious, thinking, this is in slow motion. Is this car ever going to stop? It was so clear that I heard metal ripping away from the car, glass shattering, and I remember the sudden silence of the car stopping as it slid down into an embankment. And when it broke through the water, because the water was covered with ice, it was frozen lake.
Oh, geez.
And I remember the car filling up with water. I'm upside down. The car is filling up with water. And I remember the last thing I say, Father, I don't want to die. That was my last words. The next thing I remember, it was like almost like the time it takes you to blink
Yeah.
right there. I'm standing up on the 12-foot embankment on the highway looking down at my car. The car is sinking underwater. I can still see the headlights on, but they're underwater. And I have no single scratches whatsoever on me. Not a broken bone, not even a broken fingernail.
So
And that was really the turning.
was that
I'm sorry?
were you having an an after death experience and then they revived you in the hospital? Or was that you crawled out and walked up?
I don't remember that part.
In other words, when you were looking down at the car, were you rescued, or was that you looking down at your body as an out of body experience? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think
In other words, did you die, or did that really happen where you got out of the car and walked up and looked down at it?
I remember looking down at the car
Uh-huh.
and seeing it go under. I don't remember like looking down like some people will say a near death experience and they see their body there and see it wasn't like that for me. It was just I was on the road. It was 3 o'clock in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And it was like this big hand and an arm that just held his hand out like this.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
grabbed his hand and we started walking right down that 2-lane highway.
Oh.
And ended up at a
Okay.
farmhouse.
So it was a divine angelic rescue. I understand. Okay. So it's
Definitely,
kind of
definitely
both.
one
Okay. Okay. Now I understand.
definitely 100%.
Oh,
And
that's
and I
amazing.
always tell people without going into too much detail, heaven is a lot more beautiful than people think.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And so that
It's
helped.
a lot more colorful than people think.
And
The colors here that are beautiful, they are nothing compared.
did you see heaven? Did you have?
I did.
Oh, oh my gosh.
I
What
did.
happened?
It was like we were really tall. It was almost like we were 10 to 12 foot tall, really, really tall people. And we were just floating over this, or flying over it, floating over it, hovering over it. I don't know what you would call it, over this field that had the most beautiful, colorful tulips that I've ever seen in my life. And they were different parts of heaven. There wasn't just one heaven.
Yeah.
It was several different parts of heaven.
Wow.
And it was just the brightest, most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Without saying a word. Without saying a word. Without feeling anything. You just felt this peace like it was okay. Like whoever this person, which was God, was leading me to go, I was going. It was just like natural. It was almost as natural as a toddler following their parents or wanting mom to hold them. It felt the same way without saying a single word.
Wow.
So my friend Mark was there, who died in a car crash, and then I was with Jesus.
Did you see his face?
I didn't see his face. I was
Did
just
it
able
look
to
like
see
the
from his.
shroud on TikTok?
No, I don't know about that, but
They've got this composition, a digital composition. If you look of the shroud and how it's amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Oh my God. Yeah, because they say like people that have had those experiences that everything's times 1,000. Like there's a guy Bill Wise who says he went to hell. 28 minutes
Oh,
in
I
hell.
remember his
Oh my
story.
gosh.
I
But
remember his
he's
story.
like, I just knew the smell was 1,000 times worse, the everything. And then with heaven, it's 1,000 times more colorful, more beautiful. So like our senses, everything's
It
times a
is.
thousand. So,
It's so colorful. It's just I don't know. You can't describe it. It's like when I have my friends from the Midwest that want to come here and visit, and I tell them different stories
yeah.
and what's here and different histories and music. And hey, we still got an '80s arcade room that I go to all the time, still, even at my age. And
Yeah.
they don't understand that because they don't have that back there, back home. But
Wow. That's
that
amazing.
doesn't give them that doesn't give them the full experience until they experience it. I can tell them about
Yeah,
it all I want,
exactly. Mm,
you know.
yeah.
I can tell them about Jesus and how heaven was all I want, but until they experience it, they're never going to, they're never going to fully know the impact of that. I was just fortunate because I was needed back here.
Yeah. Well, and that probably had a very significant, how does getting back to this, God grant me the serenity to accept what I can't change, right? And then the courage to change what I can. And then what the heck's the difference, right? So getting back to that, after that experience, I could imagine so much shifted in your mind about just this world and its importance versus it's not. We put so much stock in all this stuff around us. Something like that happens, you're like, none of this stuff really matters. I mean, we can't take the
And I,
difference, I guess.
and during the car accident, I was in a long-term relationship at the time, and I didn't talk about that for 5 years after it happened.
Wow.
We went out 3 days later. I had to take the police out there 3 days later to find the car because it had sunk. There was no trace of it, other than all this debris in the field where the car got hit and went end over end and rolled 9 times and down into an embankment. And they found the car in the water, but they didn't know where it was. So I had to take them out there and tell them,
Oh
and
my
they
gosh.
still was convinced, like, "Are you sure you were the driver?" And then they pulled out the car, and I remember the first thing that I remember when the car pulled up and they put it on solid ground, I took a picture of it, and I still got that picture. I'll send it
Yes,
over
you
to you.
showed me it. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
that
okay.
looks
I didn't
like
know if I had
80s or
done
something.
that.
And yeah. But it wasn't
Yeah, and
80s.
it was just completely
Yeah.
just like the engines hanging out and the roofs crashed, smashed all the way down. And then, but what I remember about that car is I went to the fair about a week before and they had one of those things. Remember how they could bend those things, the metals into different shapes and different things? They'd do like a heart,
Kind
and then
of.
they would do maybe like a square or something like that, that they could just bend the metals
Uh-huh.
and make different things. Okay. Well, I had an angel made for mine,
Wow.
hung from the mirror of my
Yeah.
car. Now, if you look close on the picture, if you can zoom in on that picture sometime, you will see the angel part is bent straight, but it's still hanging on the mirror.
Oh my gosh. Did you get it out and keep it?
I didn't. I left it. I left it with the car. I said,
Oh,
no, I'm leaving it right there. I don't need to take it
it'll be,
with me. I got other things in my future.
it'll be there waiting for you when you get to heaven. Wow.
It really scared me for 5 years. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know where to go with it. And then finally something come up on a podcast, and I just went into the story, and I said, you know what? This is a turning point in my life. I need to put this in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Because I was scared for the longest time to talk about it. Who's
Because you
going to
just
believe that?
thought, yeah, people didn't, but there's so many of those
And
stories
that's
out
why I
there.
thought it was so important to take the picture
Yeah.
with the understanding these are things that I can't change.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't change that I was abused. I can't change that I have PTSD, and it's always going to be with me the rest of my life. I'm going to die with PTSD.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
Yeah.
I can't change how this car was. There was nothing left, and I walked away from it without a single, finger cut. You know, those are things that I had to accept along the way. That was very difficult for me.
What I think is beautiful about that is all the abuse and pain that was put on you. You get in this wreck and you come out with no scars. That was something I think God did for a lot of reasons, right? It's like me being dyslexic and told I was stupid, and God, through a radio endorsement, gives me a couple of master's degrees. He's like, you know what? We're not going to fix it. We're just going to redo it. So he's saying, look,
We're just going to redo
look,
it.
you got in this horrible wreck and you got no scars. I mean, that's kind of a beautiful thing. Wow. Oh my gosh. Your life is unreal, Chad. I can see why they're making a movie out of it. One of the difficult parts of this concept of serenity is the wisdom to know the difference. This is the hard part of the prayer, is
It
discerning
is.
what do I surrender to God, right? And what do I take action on, and how can I get the courage to do it? Especially when you're wired for trauma, your brain is, you're taught to survive, right? Your brain's wired to run, to hide, survive, not trust, believe that the world is very chaotic, right? You grow up, you've got no trust in the world or anybody because you have no frame of reference for it. So were you able to sort of work through that? Because a lot of times, like trauma survivors are frozen. They'll do stuff like take them canoeing and stuff, and the rapids come, and they don't even try to save themselves. They don't or anything because they're so used to not having any control, right? And so here you've got this serenity thing that's saying, control the things I can, and it's probably counterintuitive to a lot of the way your brain's wired. So back to what I'm actually asking you is, how are you able to discern the difference? What's God's, what's mine? And how do I get the courage to take action on those things that I know that I can change? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think for me that the accident happened in 2004, and I think that's where I surrendered, and not just not just to surrender. I surrendered my whole life because I was actually afraid for the first time in my life that I was really going to die. The water was coming up. I had very little choices to make, and like I said, you don't know what's going to come out of you when you get ready to die. You don't know what your last words are going to be,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
If anything,
yeah,
just like you said, when we are, you know, built for trauma and it's been based around our whole life, there are things like that we are just numb to and we don't feel.
yeah,
But for me, when I surrendered like that and I seen what God pulled me away from and who they pulled me away from, because it opened up a lot of things, not just me being saved in this car accident, but a lot of things that were going on in my relationship.
yeah.
It exposed a lot of things. And I think that's what it was for. And this is how I know that it was for that, because 6 months later, after the accident, 6 months, okay, I walked up on stage in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was honored as one of the 10 outstanding young Americans in the whole country.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So I mean, he told me during the process spiritually why this was happening, but why I was needed back here. And that's how I had to understand of like, that was God. That's what God wanted. And I can't change that because Chad just wants to be a normal everyday guy with some kind of cool job or something.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be, on, 7 podcasts a week and telling my story and
Yeah.
and counseling to other people that are far more educated about things in the world than I am.
Yeah.
And then God's going to send me into the White House to meet the President of the United States, and he's going to
Wow.
give me an award, you
Oh
know.
my gosh.
So those are things that I had to accept that I don't know if I was ready for those things. I didn't know if I was ready to accept those things
It's almost like you're
because
Forrest
I had
Gump,
been
or something, only without that mental disorder. It's like you're just like, What happened? I'm
Exactly.
going to run across the world now. And
And I was definitely running too. I was running
wow.
to everything and from everything.
Wow. So,
But that's where I got grounded. It was the turning point was the car accident. And then 6 months later, the 10 Outstanding Young Americans Award. 4 years later, I was honored for the Daily Points of Light Award by President George Bush in the White House.
wow. Oh,
And wow, it got crazy there for a while. And it's getting crazy again. But I know that's my calling, and I know that's what God wants. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my days that I have here.
wow. Well, finally, forgiveness. So part of this concept of acceptance is really forgiveness. Because when we're not accepting, we're not forgiving, right? We're saying, what resentment is in the big book and Alcoholics Anonymous and everything else, in my opinion, unforgiveness is, Chad, you owe me. You hurt me and you
Ah,
owe me. So if your mother owes you, is there anything she could ever do to fix it? No. Right?
no,
No. And that's where I think the
nothing.
big piece of acceptance has to play out is there isn't enough in the world that people that wronged us could ever do to fix it. So that's the acceptance piece. Were you able to come to a place of forgiveness for her? I mean,
Absolutely,
I know it's a daily
absolutely, and
thing. Like, God, I forgive, help me to forgive. Like, God, I believe, help me.
yes,
But
yes. But mainly, it was simple for me. It was simple because I know after the car accident, all the things that God forgive me for, and all the people that I hurt, all the drugs that I did, all the alcohol that I did, all the running around that I did, going through relationship after relationship that I did, all those things he just forgive me in an instant. So why would I or how could I not forgive her?
yeah,
Because what was done to him was way worse than was done to me. So in an instant, I had to forgive her. Did I forget about it? Absolutely not. I think about it every day. I have nightmares about my mother last night.
oh,
My wife's waking me up in the middle of the night because I'm acting out in my dreams. I'm fighting for my life still.
wow.
You know, I'm 52 years old and I'm fighting in my dreams, fighting my mother. When I wake up, I got this beautiful picture window that's right behind my screen here that you can't see, that has a large, beautiful field. It's just an open field,
Yeah,
and this is why we put my computer and my desk right here. So I can look out that every day
yeah,
and I can reflect on a lot of things, and it helps so very much. But there's also days, like I said, that I can get in a trance, but because of my wife is so aware and because she's put in the work to study PTSD, she knows there's something very wrong.
wow. Oh my goodness. So,
So I had to forgive her.
yeah, yeah,
I had no choice.
right. It would
For
kill you.
me, for me to do the work that God wants me to do, I had to forgive her.
Yeah. And that's part of the recovery process because they say resentment is the number one killer. So most people relapse due to resentment and blame. And so, and now with your experience, you understand that. Like, so for me, I know as an alcoholic, I can be a ticking time bomb. And if I don't forgive,
Sure.
I know tick, 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 that, maybe I won't drink, but I will spiral in so many other ways. And so you get to
Absolutely.
know where it's like, I got to get to
Myself
the
too.
therapy and figure out how to forgive, because
Yeah,
otherwise
absolutely.
I will
I'm the
die.
same way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Did your mother ever find the Lord? I mean, she killed your dad. I just got to know, like, did she shoot him or your stepdad?
She didn't shoot him or anything like that. They were addicted to hydroxycodone.
Oh yeah, like the fentanyl, the oxy.
Right.
Yep, during the
Right.
big oxy
So
thing.
exactly. Exactly.
Opiates.
So
Yeah.
they were both heavily addicted to that. And she just crushed up some of the pills and cooked it and injected it in his back when he was sleeping. And he had a massive heart attack and died at 38 years old.
And so her and your grandma, they never found the Lord or never, to your knowledge?
Unfortunately,
Okay.
no.
Do you think that
I
they were demon possessed? Did you have to go through any deliverance? Was there any type of stuff like that? You know, a lot of people with abuse, there's like ritualistic abuse, and so they have to kind of go through some deliverance and stuff.
there was no deliverance like that for me,
Okay.
because I realized as I got older and older, it was more mental issues
Yeah. Yeah.
that just carried over and got more vicious by generation after generation.
Yeah.
Started with my great grandmother, who was alive at the time, and I was aware of how vicious she was, and it carried over to my grandmother, over to my mother, and I said, no more. It stops right here.
Just the
It
way you
stops in my generation.
describe her getting down in your eyeballs, and I just kept thinking, this woman's got a demon, you know? But that's a whole
Yeah.
nother issue.
It,
Don't tune
yeah.
out.
And many people have asked that
Oh,
question.
good. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
a normal question to be
Right.
asking
Right.
me.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
Chad.
it
Well,
is.
we were going to talk for 20 minutes. It's been an hour and 5 minutes. So
Ah,
many more things
dang.
I'd love to ask you, but I don't want to keep you all day. And I know you probably have 6 more of these to do. But in closing, people are going to hear this that are struggling with trauma and addiction. And what encouragement and advice would you share with them about finding serenity and finding hope and living a, I don't want to say normal life, but living a good life. You're going on to have a good life despite that trauma.
I think it comes down to celebrating the small victories.
Yeah.
I don't think we do that enough. And that's where I had to start. And it took a long time for me to even celebrate the small victories because I was like, that's not enough. That's not where God wants me to go. He wants me to do bigger. He wants me to do bigger. Now here I am, 52 years old, getting ready to put out a major motion picture about my life where millions of people are going to go see it. And my family has more excitement than I do
Yeah.
because I still don't feel that that's enough.
Right. Wow.
I think God wants me to even do more.
Yeah.
So what I did, I went out and I just landed my first TEDx talk,
Wow.
which is huge.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, what's next? Because that's not enough. God wants me to do more. He didn't allow me to come back in 2004 from the car accident to do these things. Yes, those are great things for society, but he wants me to do more, I feel. So I think celebrating the little victories
Yeah.
are very, very important. If you're even in the middle of addiction and you can go 2 days without your addiction, write it down. Start journaling. If you don't like to write, pull out your phone, open up your notes, put it in your note. I made it 2 days.
Yeah.
Go back next week and look at it again.
Amen.
The small victories add up to big victories.
Yeah. And that's huge because, we learn so much through relapse, A, and B, if you're even in recovery trying, celebrate that, that way, you fall down, you can still get back up, right? You take a shot, you don't have to drink the whole bottle. Like we do that. The
That's
abstinence
right.
violation effect is what they call it, where it's, well, I had a piece of cake, so I might as well eat the whole thing. I do that all the
Might
time,
as well.
but you don't have to. You can start right where you are.
No, you don't have to, but you have to surround yourself with positive
Yes.
people, or it would,
Yes.
or it would be just like I said. Well, you might as well.
Right?
I mean, you already ate one piece. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's good, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Oh my gosh, Chad, you've been such an inspiration. Thank you so much for all the stuff you shared. And
Well, thank you for having me for so long too.
super
With that,
fun. Tell people how to, get in touch with you. Maybe they want to book you, stuff like that.
sure. You can go to my website. I have different podcasts on there already. You can get my book on there. I'll sign it for you and ship it to you faster than Amazon.
Wow.
You can go, yeah.
That's like, wow.
So you can go to gainschad.com and you can read all about my story. You can see the cast members from the movie. We got a couple really good cast members from different TV shows that you can see on there that will be playing me as well as playing my daughter. It has my email address on there. You can always email me questions or share your story with me.
Nice.
I love to hear stories
Yeah.
because this really opens up a lot of different people's hearts to share their story, and that's what I love.
Wow.
That's what I love. That's what this is about.
And probably the most amazing thing that you've shared in this whole podcast is that you can deliver your book faster than Amazon. I mean, I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
I mean, there was the near-death experience, but no, I'm just kidding. Okay, fantastic. Chad, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, friends, for listening to Genuine Life Recovery, playing on your favorite app or on my website at jodiestevens.org. It's JODIESTEVENS, jodiestevens.org. There you can check out my podcast, blog, recovery coaching info, speaking, and more. Check it out.